Because I'm based in an African university, Stellenbosch University in South Africa, I'm going to be talking from an African perspective. And it's an interesting perspective to be talking from because it's a very fast changing continent with very rapid economic growth. 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world now are African economies. And it raises a very interesting question because the dominant discourse on the continent is that what worked in the West and what worked in Asia is going to work in Africa. In other words, Africa is the last region to jump on the modernization bandwagon. Now this is what I would call emulative thinking rather than contextual thinking. And it results in the generation of solutions that often don't work. Or it blinds people to what is actually working, but is not always validated. So I think if we address this challenge from an anticipatory thinking point of view, we have to recognize that the real essence of anticipatory thinking is contextual thinking. It is about uncovering the evolutionary potential of the present in order to inform our understanding of the future, which I think is different to scenario thinking and backcasting, and requires a set of methodologies, especially qualitative methodologies for unlocking and discovering this evolutionary potential that can get built on, which is profoundly contextual. So I agree that this does mean, I agree with Roberta, this does mean building the capacity for anticipatory thinking. In other words, the societies best capable of handling the future will be those that build this capacity for anticipatory contextual thinking. So that's really my point of departure. And I think it's going to have to result, again, talking very strongly from an African perspective, in 2 key shifts or 2 key dimensions of anticipatory thinking. One is going to be a shift in our economic thinking, and the other is our shift in our understanding of research towards transdisciplinary research. As far as the first is concerned, our shift in our economic thinking from neoclassical economic thinking, which is now absolutely patently bankrupt given what's been done to Greece, but also before that many other places, particularly in the global south, to a kind of post-Keynesian heterodox economics. This paradigm shift is going to have to underpin the building of a new paradigm for human development. And it's going to, yes, it's going to obviously result in a shift from an emphasis on markets to partnerships, which include the state and sharing networks. It's obviously going to have to include a shift from a focus on exchange and scarcity to a focus on production and abundance. And yes, it's going to have to entail a shift from accumulation-centered to eco-centered types of economics. Those 3 shifts are quite well emphasized, and I won't dwell on them. What's also fairly commonly referred to as the shift from instrumentalist thinking to realism. In other words, rooting the building of our economic concepts in the real economy rather than derived from models, and a shift from individualism to more cooperative, to the recognition of cooperation and sharing. But for this discussion, the really significant shift is going to be from substantive rationality, the assumption of perfect information, to a bounded rationality. And for some Keynesian thinkers, like Stiglitz and so on, this means recognizing, yes, imperfect information, but that's not enough. For heterodox economists, it's not just about rectifying imperfect information, it's also about recognizing that because we have insufficient and sometimes non-existing information, decisions about the future get postponed or resisted, and hence the dependence on norms and lock-in. So in the African context, I've often wondered what's the root cause of this desire to emulate rather than the desire to innovate rooted in the context. And I think it's got to do with an assumption that we don't have enough information, so let's copy those who we think do have enough information. And that really is the core problem. And recognizing bounded rationality and how to address that is really going to have to lie at the core of our excavation of the evolutionary potential of the present and the building of a new economics. And it's going to have to draw on what I call transdisciplinary research. And let me just say a few words about this transdisciplinary research and how it relates to our anticipatory thinking in light of this need to think in terms of a new kind of economics. The essence of the rising wave of transdisciplinary research in different parts of the world is the desire to figure out ways of co-producing knowledge that can inform solutions to real-world problems. So this co-production with societal actors of solution-oriented knowledge, rather than for societal actors, which is really what interdisciplinary research has been about, is the key shift. And what's interesting about the transdisciplinary research field is this distinction that's made between system, target, and transformation knowledge. System knowledge being knowledge about the system as it exists now, target knowledge, the traditional concern of policy studies, what should happen, and in African context that becomes extremely normative. So in Africa we hate the current context and we're very normative about the future, but we're very bad at transformation knowledge. In other words, knowledge about what it's going to take to get from where we are now to where we need to be. So that emphasis on transformation knowledge is really key in my view for informing an anticipatory process of change. The second is recognizing the importance of joint problem definition with societal actors, rather than deriving problem definitions from the literature. And the third is the great importance of facilitation and facilitation skills. Because once one accepts one is involved in a social process with societal actors to generate real-world solutions to the problem of bounded rationality, then we are going to have to build in our researchers, but also more broadly within society, the capacity for facilitation. So if we relate this to, if I bring this back to the African context, transdisciplinary research has emerged in the European context, particularly Switzerland and the Netherlands, probably two of the most structured societies in the world, where you can safely assume the existence of stakeholders who you can engage in the process of co-production. In the African context, we have highly informalized societies with deep set networks, and what you see is not what you get. So when you want to do transformation type knowledge research to address the challenge of bounded rationality, then you're going to have to accept that you're working in the formal parts of society, but most importantly in the informal parts of society, which requires a completely different set of skills. You can't assume predetermined institutionalized stakeholders you're going to engage. So that needs addressing, and one of the ways of addressing it is incorporating, as we are doing it in my university, a really exciting new tradition across the African continent that is referred to as indigenous research methods, captured most brilliantly in a book by Gele Chilisa from the University of Botswana, and that book is entitled Indigenous Research Methods, which really is a set of very context-specific ways of generating knowledge that are ancient and very modern and postmodern, in the sense of being post-colonial. And that is really an important part of our practice. So if I can bring all my thoughts here together and come back to my point of departure, the challenge of the African context. The core challenge I believe we face on the continent is to figure out how we reinvent the future, our futures, that recognize context, especially what is unique, both internally within our societies and the global shift, especially from a sustainable development perspective that Gilberto was talking about. And once we do that, then we start breaking away from emulation. The second is that we really do need to build the capacity for anticipatory thinking. And that is going to entail, firstly, a break from neoclassical economic thinking, and an acceptance in particular of this shift from substantive to bounded rationality, where we recognize that we are going to be making decisions with insufficient or no information, but the way to solve that is not emulation, but contextual thinking. And the second, in order to address that challenge, is the building of across our universities, and that's one of the programs that I'm running with the funding from the African Union. Across our universities, this capacity for transdisciplinary research, which is really co-production of solutions to address real-world problems, rather than academics who are sitting in universities assuming they're somewhere in Europe or North America and they have to publish in Western journals for people who in Africa who don't read those journals. Instead, the transformation of the university in particular as the key generator of this new cadre of transdisciplinarians is going to be absolutely key in building up a new paradigm for human development on the African continent, which will be key for ensuring that we don't see ourselves as the last region to jump on the modernization bandwagon, because that's really not going to do the trick in the world we live in today. Thank you very much.